This is the most self-indulgent topic
Oh,
for Roy. I mean, we
go
basically
on.
allowed him to go on a soliloquy for 5 minutes about the
Yep.
philosophy of Argentinian soccer, football. I mean, it's for all those listening, I apologize.
Welcome to another ISB podcast here with Rahi and Roy. I'm your host, Sahil, covering the best topics in the world of football/soccer, whatever you call it. Today, we'll start off with a very interesting topic because we have a resident Argentine. And while Roycito himself is talented in many ways, we will talk more about his compatriots who are the managers of the world. And it seems like every which way you look, whether it's a national team, whether it's a club team, we find Argentine managers, boys. It's almost like an epidemic.
An epidemic's a good word. Because if you hung out with enough Argentinians,
Is it a good word?
It's an epidemic. It's a serious epidemic. Very loud, very obnoxious,
Handsome,
a lot of meat.
smart,
Yes. Yeah,
great
fair,
food,
fair.
the best
Good
of cuisines, the best meat. Funny.
Best meat.
Yes.
Did I say good looking?
You did. You did.
You said
You
good
did
looking,
say
but and I can't disagree there. Thank
Yeah.
you. Diego
also-
Maradona, one
yeah.
of the greatest looking players ever.
One of the
Well-
best looking men in the world.
Diego, El Diego.
Maradona y
El
Lionel
Diego.
Messi. Two most handsome men in history of soccer.
Yeah. Hey, you got your Gabriel Batistutas. You got some.
Batigo.
You got
Yes.
some
Crespo, good
good-looking dudes. Yeah. But in all seriousness, so it's very interesting because the U.S. men's national team, of course, in the process of hiring Mauricio Pochettino. You look across the world, almost every you think about the Copa America, almost every single team had an Argentine manager. You go to Simeone. You look at so many names of famous Argentine managers. Bielsa, obviously a major one with Uruguay now. Roy, let's start with you. You, of course, are of Argentine descent, and what is going on? Like, what is this phenomenon? It's not a new thing, and let's dig into this a little bit more as our first topic on the podcast today.
Take a
Yeah,
bite
it's a
out
heavy
of it,
topic.
Roy.
It's a
Take a
very
bite out
heavy
of the
topic.
parrilla.
I got to check on my parrilla. I'm cooking some ribeyes right now. But there's a lot behind this, and it goes long into history. I won't bore you with the history, but I will say the main reason, in my eyes, why the Argentine coach is not only perceived to be a great coach, but also is a great coach. There is evidence of Argentinian coaches succeeding at every level, in every league of the world, on the national team level. Like you said, look at the Copa America. What was it? 4 of 4 semifinalists had Argentinian coaches. What was it? The 2015 or 2016, it was 4 of 4, and then 3 of 4. It's almost always Argentine coaches succeeding in these tournaments. Even when the federations push back, what was it? Colombia? That was.
I don't think Jesse Marsh is Argentine, but
I
aside
don't think
from
Jesse
him,
Marsh. Yeah, no, we're talking about good countries. Good.
4 of 4, so I think 3 of 4. 3 of 4.
Yeah,
Where?
But even Colombia pushed back so hard when they hired their Argentine coach, and look at them now, one of the best teams in the world because of it. So I would say, number one, having gone to Argentina so many times, having spent a lot of time there, spent a lot of time talking soccer with Argentinian friends and family, there is an obsession, and I say obsession because it is, with tactics. And that's something you don't get here. Like sure, we talk tactics, but in general, when I talk soccer with my friend groups, we're not talking tactical systems. We're not talking styles of play. It's more who played better, who played worse. It's a very different conversation in Argentina when you're talking with anyone about soccer. And tactics, it goes back to the schools of thought. There's Menotismo, named after the coach that won the 78 World Cup, who relies on just beauty and style and what we call today tiki-taka and just individual brilliance, and less focus on this huge tactical system and designed plays, and just let the players do their thing, let their players be creative. That's one. And there's a constant debate of what's better. Is it that or Bilardismo, which is named after the coach who won the 86 World Cup. So that was more structured, more what we see today in Europe, which is designed plays, set pieces, a focus on system, a focus on you do this in this situation. When you play this position, this is your area. And it stripped that creativity out. So there's this constant debate in Argentina of what is the best system. And over the years, new systems have come out. But we don't talk about that in the US. We don't talk about systems and name systems after coaches here and which was the best and what do we rely on. It's let's hire pochettino. Let's hire Jurgen Klopp. But it's not a tactical question. It's these are our favorite coaches who have had the most success. So that's a huge reason why Argentinian coaches are as brilliant as they are, because from a young age, they're raised in an environment that has these conversations, has very philosophical and intellectual conversations around tactics and styles of play.
We chose the wrong topic here. This is the most self-indulgent topic for Roy. I mean, we basically allowed him to go on a soliloquy for 5 minutes about the philosophy of Argentinian soccer, football. I mean, it's for all those listening, I apologize. We did choose the wrong topic. I'm sorry that we catered to Roy's own sense of self and his own pride in being Argentinian.
We could talk about India's tactical system. Do you want to do that instead?
We can talk about that in cricket. But the challenge here, and what's so interesting is it is so impressive because the domestic league in Argentina is not very good. And yet, on the global stage, you have Argentinian managers having success everywhere, right? And that's what makes it so incredible. Whereas you look at the other big managers in the world, they generally come from Italy, from Germany, from England, right? These are countries that tend to produce great managers, partially because the domestic leagues are good. Now, there's also Dutch managers, but also there's a history there. What's so impressive about Argentinians and Argentinian managers is you don't have the same success on the global stage of the league itself. You look at their neighbors, in some ways, the Brazilians, who have won so many World Cups, an incredible national team, but you can't say that Brazil has produced nearly as many talented, successful managers as Argentina has. It's pretty incredible, the stark difference. And though Brazil has more World Cups, Argentina has produced more World Cup style managers. It's actually, maybe, Roy, comes out to exactly what you're talking about, tactics. And the Argentinians play a little more thinking in terms of what do we need to get out of this game? How do we need to set up the system? Where the Brazilians are much more free-flowing, much more open. I actually think it may come down to that Italian influence. And when you think about Europe, you think about the most tactical managers, they are the Italians. And in many ways, the Argentinians are the Italians of South America, Roy.
Yeah, it's mostly, I mean, tons of Italians. Messi's an Italian last name. You look at the last names in a classroom in Argentina, it's Italians. And that's a big reason. It's a ton of influence from Italy, a ton of influence from these great footballing nations in Europe. But I think it's this obsession with what style of play is going to get the best out of these players. Look at Scaloni. Nobody wanted Scaloni.
That's what I was gonna bring up Scaloni, because he's a prime example of someone who didn't have a big name, Roy. Like, he wasn't, a big name coach, and yet you see how tactically sound the current national team is for Argentina. And in fact, it's the tactics that's been giving them the success, because they player by player, they're not, excluding some positions obviously, but player by player, they're not better than some of the teams that they'll play against, and yet they look so dominant in terms of the way that the game plays out.
Yeah, they're the best team in the world. They're the best playing team in the world. I know we've had conversations of, is Spain better? No, not yet. Maybe in the future. Maybe this generational shift will say Spain is better in 5 years. But right now, it's the best team in the world. It's been the best team in the world for the past 5+ years. And a big part of that reason is Scaloni. And like I said, nobody wanted Scaloni on the national team. It would be the equivalent of the U.S. national team hiring Greg Berhalter, which we did, hiring a domestic coach with some success that nobody really knows outside of the U.S. soccer circles. That's what they did. The public was pissed, but he came in with such incredible tactical acumen, such incredible player management, individual management. He's in the conversation for the best coach in the world over the past years, and I'd say
100%.
he is.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Who is better than Scaloni at this point? What he's done with this team, the way he unlocked Messi, the way he got players like De Paul, who no one talked about ever. McAllister, no one talked about McAllister ever before Scaloni took charge of him.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And you just look at some of the other names, right? You look at Gareca, you look at Bielsa, who I mentioned, right?
Yeah.
You look at Peckerman from before, right? These are coaches that would go from team to team, and you'd see levels of varying success, sure, but levels of success across the board, so much so that they were in demand from other teams. And it just, I think we can hack it a bunch of different ways, but Roy, I think the tactics, like both of you brought up, I think it is that, and especially as you said, just growing up in those environments from a young age, because regardless of how good these players were, right? Like some of them weren't necessarily excellent national team level players, right? Like, from that perspective. But I think the tactics ingrained, it just seems to make the difference for these particular coaches from Argentina.
How do we get to have those conversations here in the US, right? Because you watch, if you turn on ESPN, if you turn on Fox and you're watching the pre-games to all these tournaments, there's zero talk of tactics. All it is about rah, rah, rah. And like, it's honestly laughable to listen to the analysis that's on TV oftentimes. And maybe that influences the way that, the American public watches the sport, but we're not having those conversations here. We are having them maybe amongst young people that watch the Premier League, that watch La Liga, that watch, Eredivisie. But I don't hear them as much as I want to.
Not really. Not to the same degree. They're not talking about philosophies and the history of tactics and systems that worked in the 80s versus the 90s. These are the kind of conversations happening in Argentina all the time. They're talking about a system developed in the 70s that no longer exists, system in the 80s from the 86 World Cup, how these new systems took both and formed new systems. That we have nothing. We have 0% of that. Even with my soccer obsessed group chats, nobody wants to talk tactics. I'll share a YouTube video of talking about Fluminense's tactical system. It gets left unread. They end up talking about how Chelsea won 3-1 or something. Nobody wants to hear it. It's not something that we've grown up with. It's not something that's ingrained in our culture. Soccer itself isn't ingrained in our culture. So we're asking for too much here. We're asking for way too much here. And it's just something we're not going to have, which is why we don't have great American coaches. They don't exist.
I would send less text, Troy. Just
you
from experience of like interacting with you, I would send a few less texts because it sounds like everyone's leaving you on red.
They are. Yeah.
I'm not the only one.
In general, not just the tactical.
I think it's a more like a self-introspection moment for you.
Yeah,
it could be.
So I think we'll wrap the topic there. But there's a couple things I want as follow-up. So for those watching on YouTube, I'd love to hear in the comments from those Argentines what they think is the reason. Is it the tactics, like Roy said? What reason do you have? And I'd love to hear from people around the world, non-Argentines and non-Americans. Do you feel like in your respective countries, do you think it's a similar thing where tactics are being discussed, or is it more of the things we talk about here in the US, as Rahi mentioned, or lack thereof, as we should say? But for those enjoying these videos, please subscribe to the channel, and those listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Coming up next, another topic. But for those out there, please subscribe to the channel. Keep watching the beautiful game, and vamos Argentina.